Okay. Can one of my NSPCC colleagues just let me know that that screen is showing, please?
Yep, it's all clear.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Shelley,
so
that's not my presentation.
no, yours will come next, don't worry.
Okay, cool. I was like, oh, the wrong one.
No, we'll just start with a bit of an introduction. So welcome everybody, and Wednesday afternoon with day 3 of the Together Conference, focusing on preventing abusive sexual behaviour, sexual offending and harmful sexual behaviour. So I'm sure that a number of you have been on a few sessions this week. Thank you for joining us and for joining this conversation. You will be familiar with some of these slides, but we are having some different people on different sessions, so I will just run through the housekeeping again. So please do check that your video and sound settings are off and that you're on mute. Do use the chat function, so we are really keen for you to interact with us, be that if you're agreeing with a comment or you've got a question, and then at the end of the session when Corinne's finished presenting, be able to do some question and answers, and then if you want to speak and ask your question, if we have time, we'll be able to do that. Of course, there is a post-event evaluation and we'll to you next week. This session is also being recorded, so that recording will be available for a short period of time. As per all of the sessions, it's really important that we think about ourselves when we're listening to the content. Some of the content that we're talking about is particularly sensitive. That could be a trigger for you. Even if you haven't experienced trauma yourself, we do recognise that trauma affects individuals, families and communities. Trauma-informed context, and we absolutely recognise that this is about all of us. Please know that support is available. If you wish to access that, you can PCC through our national helpline and our website, and there are local organisations such as Mind who are also able to assist. In terms of how you can keep connected to the work, please do follow us on social media. The Twitter handle is @TFC Plymouth, and we do have a if you search for Together for Childhood Plymouth. Please do use the hashtag TFC Conference 2021, and then you'll be able to search and see other posts related to the week. If you want to get more involved in Together for Childhood, if what you're hearing this week is really energising you and making you want to take action, please do drop us an email. And please know that all of the learning that we're all taking from this week is going to help inform the project plan for next financial year. And you absolutely can play a part in that. So today's session, I will be handing it in a moment. And today's session is very much focused on putting the theory into practice. So Corinne's going to talk you through an example of a Together for Childhood that we are delivering here in Plymouth and that you will be able to be a part of. So it's really going to kind of consolidate what we've already heard from the other speakers and hopefully really let you take something away that you know that you could be a part of. So I will just find your slide deck, Corinne.
Thanks, Shelley. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, well, thank you.
It's showing properly, or is it showing with the next slide?
I can see the first slide, so that's looking good on my screen.
Looking good.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for sort of spending the time to kind of come along to this session this afternoon. So as Shelley said, in this session, what I'm going to hopefully talk through is I'm going to explain a little bit more about how we're using some of the Together for Childhood design principles and try and bring that alive via a kind of real, tangible kind of practice example. I'm going to share an example of some work that we're currently doing in Plymouth to prevent peer-to-peer problematic sexual behaviour. And I'm also going to put a bit of an ask out to everybody else really to think about how you can genuinely create partnership with children and young people that you might be working with to understand a problem from their perspective and to begin to sort of creatively start to address that. And as Shelley said, there will be opportunities for sort of questions and answers at the end of it. I will answer any questions that I'm able to. So please kind of use the chat function or put your hand up if you can't access that. Okay.
Corinne, just to let you know, I'm just going to end this slideshow because I didn't do the sharing of the sound.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I know will be an issue later on.
Thank you. So while Shelley's doing that, what I'll do is I'll just talk a little bit about myself and who I am. So my name is Corinne Picton. I'm a children's services practitioner, which is basically NSPCC speak for social worker. And I've been working within the NSPCC in Plymouth for about 4 years now. So historically, my background has been in the sort of turn the page service, so delivering services to children and young people who have displayed harmful sexual behaviour. And I know you've heard a lot about that kind of during the week. So the session that Bartos and Eski delivered, for example. And my background, so I've been a social worker for more years than I care to really admit. My background is within the local authority. I've got a background working with young people who have been reported missing and young people at risk of sexual exploitation. And I've also spent a long time working within youth offending teams. So that's all about me. Next slide, please, Shelley. Thank you. So I put this kind of slide up really, and I'll just let you know that this is from a report published by the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. And I've put it up just to begin to sort of start to think about some of the theory behind child sexual abuse prevention. And those that are attending Donald Findlaker's session, I think it's tomorrow, he will go into this in much more detail. I am not a criminologist or a researcher by background, so I don't purport to kind of know much more about this than anybody else. But I really wanted to include it just to kind of to ground this session in some kind of context and kind of give some relevant background. So as I say, this is from an article published by the Lucy Faithfull Foundation, and it's adapted from the ECK crime triangle. And the idea with this is that it's just making the point that activities to prevent child sexual abuse and sexual exploitation are multi-layered, and they're aimed at primary, secondary and tertiary levels, so kind of universal through to targeted in kind of old money. So much of our work has been focusing on, or will focus on, those who cause harm or are concerned they may cause harm, and that's both adults and young people. Working with children and young people who may be harmed, including those that may have some additional vulnerabilities. Working with parents, carers, members of the public, professionals, etc., and anyone that's able to exert some influence to disrupt, to protect, to notice, to supervise, for example. And a focus on places where harm may take place, and by places I'm also including like the online space in that sense, and the safety of those spaces, and of course kind of having that influence on wider societal aspects as well, so influencing government policy and legislation and that sort of thing. So as I say, I've just kind of raised that as a kind of a grounding really for the context of the work that we're doing here in Plymouth. Okay, can you go on to the next slide, please, Shelley? Thank you. So in the sessions throughout the week, you would have heard repeated reference to Together for Childhood, and in Shelley and Ollie's opening of this conference as well. They spoke in quite a lot of detail about the Together for Childhood project, and I think they may have also shared this slide. And just to kind of very, very quickly recap, so Together for Childhood is a partnership, a place-based approach to create some evidence about what really works to prevent child sexual abuse. And the way we've kind of conceived of it, really, we've kind of put all of those kind of multi-layers that I've spoken about already, all of the aspects of the work we are focusing on and with whom, we've kind of split it into these building blocks. So you can see there reference to healthy relationships work. So I'm thinking specifically about Marie's session earlier today about relationships and sex education and pornography. That would kind of fall into that. Community engagement. Trauma-informed system and how that kind of threads throughout all of this work, the importance of public health messaging, and the activities to prevent offending and harmful sexual behaviour. think someone's, there we are. And I think just to sort of make the point here that preventing child sexual abuse requires more than action from professionals. And for change to be meaningful and sustained, activity should be community-led and co-created and in partnership. And throughout this presentation, what I hope to kind of draw out is that this includes being in partnership with children and young people themselves. And I'm going to specifically talk about our Young Voices project and as an example of how we, how we've done work within secondary schools within Plymouth to address peer-to-peer unhealthy relationships. Okay, next slide, please, Shelley. Okay. Hopefully you can see that it's quite a lot of information on one slide, but I couldn't find a kind of clearer sort of depiction of it. So hopefully you're able to kind of see that clearly. So when we were thinking about participation or co-creation, we looked at a variety of models that exist, and those of you that kind of work a lot in the participation fields and kind of youth workers that are listening to this will be very familiar with the different kind of participation models that exist. We found that lots of them depicted it as a sort of ladder. We deliberately went away from that kind of ladder analogy because we didn't want there to be a sort of depiction of any kind of sense of hierarchy that might come with that. So when thinking about our participatory approach to the work we wanted to do, we've utilised the Office of the Children's Commissioner's Wheel of Participation, which is the image that you're seeing here. And this image demonstrates that regardless of the origin of the project or the entry point, if you like, for children and young people, that young people's contribution can and should be valuable and meaningful. So, for example, the project that I'm going to be speaking about was grant funded. So the parameters of the grant were agreed beforehand by adults. So it would very much kind of fall into the sort of adult initiated kind of aspect of this model, if you can see it there. But what we hope to kind of demonstrate throughout this work is that although young people may start at a certain point, that actually they can move around that wheel quite quickly. And we were really keen that young people from the outset were involved in the planning and sort of decision making of this. We were also really wanted to kind of focus on valuing, recognising and rewarding young people's contribution. It was incredibly important to us. And we really wanted our behaviours to be commensurate with those values, and for the relationship, so the relationship between us as kind of practitioners and the young people we were working with not to be an exploitative one, which I think unfortunately can kind of sometimes happen. And internally, so within the NSPCC, we had already kind of started that thinking. So we'd created a participation checklist to encourage some real thought and careful planning prior to any sort of participation work that we sort of undertook. To really ask staff members to consider how we will ensure that the engagement is meaningful for both us as an organisation, but also more importantly for the young person, so it wasn't a kind of one-sided relationship. And in terms of kind of recognising and valuing engagement and commitment, we recognise that for some young people who we work with on this project, having a voice and having the ability to influence and change was incredibly meaningful in and of itself. For lots of young people we work with, it was the first time they'd ever actually really been listened to and had what they were saying taken seriously, and there being something tangible and real kind of coming from that. But we also recognised that it was important to give young people a choice about how much or little they kind of wanted to contribute. And we also made the decision quite early on to recognise efforts with sort of vouchers that we all gave to young people. And we also created opportunities for young people to be awarded for their contribution via virtual badges, which recognise their kind of contribution level at different levels. You can go on to the next slide, please, Shelley. Thank you. Okay, so the project is the Young Voices project, and I've mentioned already that it was quite a unique project for us, really, in that it was externally funded by an organisation called the Samworth Foundation. And Samworth were really interested in participation approaches to address child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation. So the project is a 3-year project, and we're just coming towards the end of year 2 of that project. And you can see there the purpose of the project was for young people to act as ambassadors, to raise awareness amongst their contemporaries, amongst their peers, about peer-to-peer unhealthy relationships and inappropriate sexual behaviour. So our activities in year 1 were based in Marine Academy, which is a secondary school in Plymouth. And the approach that we took, it was an open access sort of approach, really, an open access opportunity for young people to take part if they chose to. And so it would very much form into the kind of primary prevention sort of side of things. And young people were not selected for involvement on the basis of any specific lived experience that they may have had, any lived experience of peer-to-peer harms. But of course, it's by the same token, I think it's naive of us to expect that those young people didn't have some experience, some relevant experience, either directly or indirectly. So we started off with our youth engagement officers, so Rachel and Simone, who I think are sort of on the call today, kind of going into that school, and myself, and just being part of assembly, so kind of effectively explaining the project to young people, explaining what we hope to achieve, and sort of seeing whether anybody was interested, really. And we followed this up with a visible presence at school. So for the kind of week or 2 afterwards, we would go to school at a regular basis into Marine Academy. We would have a presence in the kind of the yard during break and lunchtime. And that was to start building those relationships with young people very early on, and also provide them those informal opportunities to kind of ask any questions and kind of, find out a little bit more about the project and whether it was something they wanted to really be part of. And I think it's a real testament to that approach that actually we had engagement from 24 young people for more than 9 months. And I think from kind of my experience of kind of participation groups in other areas, that's actually a really, really good retention rate for young people. So the group of 24 were from years 8, 9 and 10 at Marine Academy, so quite a kind of mixed age range there. And they would initially meet with our youth engagement officers, Rachel and Simone, once a week at school. And then latterly, as the kind of the sessions progressed and the kind of work moved on, we started including some additional kind of weekend sessions into the mix as well. Okay, you can go on to the next slide, please, Shelley. Thank you. So I've mentioned a few times how we had some youth engagement officers involved in this, and for the NSPCC, which I guess kind of traditionally has been a very social work sort of focused organisation, it was a real new way of working for us, and we found it really valuable to kind of utilise those specific kind of youth work engagement skills. And the real value of the youth work approach is starting at the same place as young people, and this real sense of kind of building that relationship and going on along a journey together. I know it sounds corny, but it was really great. So initially, the activities that we engaged the group with were focused on helping the young people come together as a group, before supporting them to develop their understanding of and challenge one another's misgivings or myths about healthy relationships and what peer-to-peer abuse was and looked like. And having then developed that kind of understanding through this group discussion, the group then began to establish what a healthy relationship looked like for them. And in turn, they then started to develop some of the messages that they wanted to advocate as part of their campaign. And there was a real strong focus on building those supportive relationships and the safe place to talk about this stuff before we got onto any kind of psychoeducative sort of aspects of work. So it was just that real grounding that actually this is a place where it's okay to talk about this. And in addition to that, early on, we identified a number of ways that young people could support, we could support young people to confidently advocate that message, that campaign a message amongst their peers. So, for example, some of our participation group members undertook some media training with one of our senior media officers within the NSPCC. And we also commissioned an organisation called the Speakers Trust to deliver a sort of training session for some young people, which was all about confidence in public speaking. I'm kind of wishing now I paid a bit more attention to that bit. And then we also had some colleagues from the zone in Plymouth who came in and trained a group of students using their kind of peer listening model as well. So that was a really, really valuable experience. Can you go on to the next slide, please, Shelley? Thank you. So I've spoken a lot there about the activities that we did with young people in that group, but we were also conscious that we wanted to kind of, for that work that we were doing with this group, to kind of fall within this kind of wider supportive context and become part of a kind of whole school approach rather than this group over here that's doing this thing on its own. We really wanted to be kind of embedded within a school setting that was kind of understanding of the value of the work and kind of, you know, creating those opportunities to really kind of repeat the activities that were taking place, and that real whole school approach. So early on, we offered training opportunities to staff within Marine Academy. So a number of members of staff undertook the NSPCC's online understanding HSB in schools training. A bit of a plug there. It's only about 30 quid. It's absolutely brilliant. So if you go onto NSPCC Learning, you'll be able to kind of sort of see the details of that training. And we were also really fortunate in that our current partners Make Amends, so I think you're going to hear from them on Friday afternoon, were able to come into school and develop and deliver some introduction to restorative practices training, which was aimed at staff members as well, which was fantastic. And we were also really fortunate in that we were able to offer some introduction to bystander interventions training. Now bystander interventions, I think they're worthy of a whole session in and of themselves, really. So I'll try not to kind of go off on a complete tangent because it's really, really interesting. And I think many people on the call may have even taken part in that session as well. And the brief idea behind yes, absolutely, yeah, we can put them in the chat, no problem. The brief idea behind the bystander interventions is it's about members of the public, bystanders, people that are friends of others, seeking those opportunities to intervene and change the narrative. And I'm not talking intervening in an incident that is highly aggressive or highly violent, so those kind of high risk situations, but intervening, for example, if you're with a group of friends and they're making a sexist joke, for example, or intervening if you're with a group of students that are sharing an indecent images around, for example. So we were really fortunate that we were able to kind of start to kind of sort of deliver some of those bystander sessions. And I think the bystander aspect of work has almost taken on a bit of a life of its own, really. And I know there's lots of training that's kind of sort of in development and kind of happening at the moment, and lots of links with the Plymouth's wider networks in terms of kind of sexual violence and domestic abuse. So kind of really fantastic stuff. Okay, I digress. I will go back to the point. You can go on to the next slide, Shelley. Thank you. So back to our young people. So our young people were supported to consider the different campaign methods, so the way that they would sort of share their campaign, before agreeing that they wanted the campaign to be delivered via the medium of rap. Just fantastic. And I often kind of say, and apologies for those who heard me sort of say this before, that I think that's the value of co-creation with young people. Never in a month of Sundays would me, a 40-year-old woman, have come up with the idea of developing a rap. It just wouldn't have kind of been in my focus at all. But young people were just so creative and kind of coming up with these ideas so quickly. So yeah, a rap it was, which was fab. So to help with producing it, 3 young people from our group volunteered to form a selection panel to listen to the presentations of various music production companies across Plymouth and kind of the outer areas. and to effectively select the best ones. So though young people were in the driving seat in terms of recruiting that supplier, which was fantastic, and we were really fortunate that they selected Plymouth Music Zone, and I think a lot of people from Plymouth will be sort of familiar with the work that they do. So yeah, the young people picked Plymouth Music Zone, and they were involved in all aspects of the rap. So the writing of the lyrics, the kind of the production of the rap, the recording, all of these aspects. Young people were involved with all aspects of that from the get-go, really, which was fantastic. And the other thing that we kind of noticed quite early on, that this group was really starting to kind of form a real sense of group identity. They were really kind of becoming quite a tight group, and kind of, you know, quite a coherent group. And we were really, really pleased with that, and really wanted to kind of encourage that. And young people were then saying that they wanted to kind of almost have this sort of sense of a brand amongst themselves. And they started to refer to themselves as the PL5, which kind of references the area of kind of Ernie Settle, which is the focus of Together for Childhood. So again, kind of alongside young people, we commissioned a local sort of design company, N9 Design, to work with young people to come up with a sort of brand logo, really, which kind of represented them. And you will see that kind of in some of the later examples of kind of how that's kind of been used as part of the campaign. And we also put them on hoodies as well. So young people looked really smart with those N9 hoodies, which was cool. Okay, can you go on to the next slide, please, Shelley? Thank you. So yeah, you can see some of these images here of the kind of creativity in action, really. Some images here of the young people in the Plymouth Music Zone studio, and the sort of last image of Plymouth Music Zone coming into Marine Academy and kind of delivering some sessions with the young people in there as well. For me, some of these images are quite profound, because they were actually, a few of them were taken maybe a week, or I think it was about a week or so before the first lockdown. So it was really tough, because we were reaching such a crucial stage in the project. So young people were going in, and they were really kind of starting to get involved in that real production of this fantastic resource, really. And then we had COVID, and we had lockdown, and everything just ground to a halt. And I think it's fair to say that kind of we had an initial moment of, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? It passed very, very quickly, and we soon kind of scooped ourselves back up. And the young people were a real inspiration with that, because they were saying to us that they were so disappointed, but they were so keen to carry on if it was at all possible. So those young people, they wanted to keep being involved, so we learned very quickly how to use Zoom, all of us, and then we switched our delivery into an online delivery. And I think online is an interesting kind of delivery mode. I think for some young people it's horrible and they don't like it, and for some young people, for a variety of reasons, being able and having the space and the resources and the mentacity to kind of, I just made a word up then, I think, to kind of engage in that activity just wasn't there. But for a lot of young people, they actually described it as a bit of a lifeline. There were some young people that didn't have any contact with peers or people outside of their home kind of for a huge stretch of the first part of lockdown. So the ability to kind of engage in something that they enjoyed, something they found meaningful, something they felt they had a real influence over, was absolutely fantastic. And we kind of supplemented that as well with some sort of doorstep delivery. So we would kind of create these sort of care packages for young people and sort of drop them at the doorstep and kind of have a sort of very distant conversation with young people. And I think that was really nice for us to kind of, again, be commensurate with our values, that actually young people were still in our mind and they were still important to us despite all of this, and that actually together we could kind of find a real way through this. Yeah, profound images, but actually we found a way through, which was fantastic. Okay, Shelley, can you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is the exciting bit. So you can see here the lyrics to the rap, catch you through it all. And you can see the logo that I mentioned earlier on that had been co-created with young people, so that the PL5 logo. They came up with that design all by themselves, which was absolutely fantastic. And it looked really, really smart on a hoodie as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, hopefully, if it works, play the rap for you. When we got to the kind of recording stage of things, lots of young people just either weren't able to or weren't comfortable kind of, you know, recording because they had to use like mobile phones and things like that. So so the actual audio is very high on practitioner voices, mine included, sorry about that. But there are a few young people that chose to take part in that way, but that's absolutely fine. And although it's very, very catchy, can I urge you to mute yourselves if you're going to sing along? So, okay, hopefully it's going to work.
Sorry, I've just stopped presenting because people are saying in the chat they can't hear it.
Okay.
So I'm just going to attempt to do that again.
If it doesn't work, what I can do is I can put the link. So we've put it on a YouTube channel, so I can put the link in the chat. So if it doesn't work this time, sorry folks, but you can try and access it that way.
Sorry, my computer's having a bit of a wobble. Oh, some people are saying they could hear it, so that's interesting. Right. I wonder if I could play it off the YouTube.
I think most people are saying they could hear it, actually, just looking at it.
I'm sorry, I feel a bit bad for stopping it now.
That's fine.
Okay, lots of people. I'm going to give it another go.
We'll take that as like a practice, you know, so I'll expect you all to sing it back to me in like 10 minutes. So
apologies to those of you that can't hear it. I don't understand why that is when some of you can. I'm going to give it a go now. Oh, now I can't play it.
Ta-da! So yeah, so that's the wrap. Drop the mic. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, even listening to it now, I'm just so immensely proud of that group of students who were able to come up with such profound lyrics that really kind of got to the core of actually what it means to be a good friend. So it was, yeah, they're fantastic. I will gush no longer. Okay. And for those that couldn't listen to it, I'm really sorry about that, but I will make sure I put the kind of link in the chat now. Let me just do that again. So this is the link to the kind of the YouTube that sort of shows this. So yeah, so I will just talk to you now about the dissemination plans, kind of what we've kind of done with that really fantastic resource that young people have created. So young people within Marine Academy. So my understanding is that all of Year 7 have now accessed that RAP, and the school have got plans to kind of then incrementally kind of show it to kind of different year groups. Of course, all the kind of dissemination plans were also affected by COVID and all of the kind of restrictions around that. We've also shared it via our social media channels, and I've mentioned the kind of YouTube link, which I've put in the chat now, so hopefully you can all access that. It's shared on the Plymouth Music Zone website, so those that are kind of familiar with Plymouth Music Zone, you can kind of go there and kind of see another version of it there. It was recently shared as part of Plymouth's 16 Days of Action on Domestic Abuse as well. And it's also been used by some of the other Samworth grantees. So the fund was kind of accessed by a number of organisations across the country, and it's been used by some of those grantees within their training as well. And if you find some relevance of kind of sharing that amongst your kind of groups and your networks, then please do, because we just want the kind of the information and the message to get out to as many people as we possibly can. Okay, can we go on to the next slide? Thanks, Shelley. So because this is part of a sort of Together for Childhood project, and I mentioned earlier on, it was about developing some evidence about what works, not just what we like to do. We've had a really fantastic evaluation presence from my colleague Claire White and others. So you'll see in this slide some of the sort of feedback from young people about how they found the process and what it meant to them. So young people told us that being part of the participation groups had made them think about their relationships more, and they really welcomed the opportunity to have a safe, informal space where they could talk about issues or concerns. And they thought that because this was facilitated by having external youth engagement officers, Simone and Rachel, working alongside them, which made it easier to open up. Young people also valued having the opportunity to learn some practical skills, so working with professionals to design the logo and recording the RAP, but they also developed some other skills as well, so the kind of the sessions with the Speakers Trust, for example. And they talked about building relationships and friendships with each other, improving their communication skills, and being able to negotiate with each other to develop the RAP. Imagine like 24 different opinions on kind of what it should look like and sound like. And they also felt a real sense of being included and belonging, and told us that the project had given them a voice and they felt that they were being heard. And young people also hoped that others would feel able to talk about bad times or difficulties or issues because they had heard the message in the RAP. So some of the benefits they experienced themselves, so for example, being able to talk and having their voices heard, they hoped that would be able to be experienced by other young people as well. Okay, we go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our evaluation officers also kind of sought some feedback from some of the staff members within Marine Academy who were kind of more directly involved in this work. And school staff also highlighted a range of positive changes that came out of the project. So from their perspective, they felt that young people were empowered, and the workshops made it okay for them to talk about things and feel less embarrassed about that. And there were also a number of disclosures which resulted from young people talking about relationships and realizing that some of the behaviours that they were experiencing actually weren't appropriate. And this led to a greater understanding of the issues that young people were facing and enabled better support to be provided. Encouragingly, they also felt that the value of this approach had been proved, and they would like to take forward more peer-to-peer projects, particularly working with young people with where they were already identified some kind of worries or concerns. And the support provided was also wider than the participation group, because the RAP would be shared across the whole school community, and staff were appreciative of the additional input from the NSPCC staff as they felt that the communication was really great, and lots of useful resources were shared. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I've mentioned that it's a 3-year project, so all of that fantastic work was part of our year 1 project within Marine Academy, and I think it's important to state at this stage that some of the young people from that first participation group within Marine Academy, all of the members of the group were given an opportunity to continue their involvement, continue their journey sort of through this project as part of a young person's advisory group. And we've had, I think it's between sort of 6 and 8 young people who've sort of wanted to become part of that advisory group, and they've been engaging with us on a sort of fortnightly basis throughout. And again, we wanted this was an aspect, if we go back to that kind of that understanding of the kind of the Children's Commissioner kind of wheel of participation, that actually we didn't want to kind of set the parameters for what that advisory group would look like. We wanted young people to come with their ideas about what they thought that should be and what should that involve. So young people were saying, for example, they wanted to act in a supportive or advisory sort of capacity for year 2 students and beyond. And there were also lots of great ideas about generating some kind of multi-generational opportunities within the community of early settlers. So young people from the advisory group meeting, for example, with the Tea and Toast group that kind of meets there to kind of really share the messages across generations. So in year 2 of our activities, we've been working with Stoke Damrell Community College within Plymouth, and ACE, which is a local kind of pupil referral unit, so an alternative provision for young people, and also Milford School, which is a school for young people with complex and sometimes quite profound physical and learning disabilities. So we've kind of gone from one project to kind of 3 additional kind of participation groups. And at this stage, we can't really say what the new campaigns will look like, because we really want it to be young people led. And we're at the very beginning stages of young people coming up with those fantastic creative ideas about what their project, what their campaign is going to look like. So, for example, some of the early conversations coming out within Milford School, for example, is about developing some form of kind of teaching resource or campaign kind of within the school that specifically looks at issues of consent. So there are quite a high proportion of students within that school who are or have autistic spectrum disorders. So sometimes kind of things like consent can be a little grey and a little kind of nuanced and a bit complicated, I think, sometimes in the way it's kind of traditionally discussed and explained within relationships and sex education. So that group really want to, develop a young person-led resource to kind of to explain that a little bit more. And within our other schools, one of the great ideas that's kind of coming out at the moment is about using craftivism as a way of kind of protesting, or a way of kind of enabling activism, really. So that works really well in that we've kind of in this strange phase now where we've kind of gone from, or we're starting to move from remote delivery and starting to, dare we dream about kind of actually seeing young people face to face, which would be nice. But craftivism is quite nice, because the idea behind craftivism is young people will be individually creating their own projects. So, for example, they will be crocheting hearts or painting pebbles or doing little pottery bits and bobs. And the idea is that each of those objects, there will be a message or a hashtag or some kind of campaign thread sort of throughout them, and the objects are left in public places, or even kind of given as gifts to influential people, as a way of those people kind of in the community, or kind of, you know, people with some influence kind of seeing this being directed towards a hashtag or a web page, and really seeing that message for young people. So it's a nice way of kind of going from the individual activity to kind of grouping it together. But yeah, that's kind of all I can say about that at the moment, because it is very much a kind of work in progress, and it would be really nice to kind of have opportunities to kind of give you further detail about that as sort of things progress, really. And the other fantastic development we've had kind of this year is about the use of restorative approaches in schools. So we started to kind of dip a toe into it a little bit in our first year, and in year 2, we've developed a partnership with Make Amends. And what Make Amends are really doing now is kind of really starting to embed that restorative approach within schools. So they're in the process of training up members of staff within these schools. So you've got staff champions about restorative approaches. Then we're going to get into a stage of developing or training young people champions, and considering a kind of suite of options of resources, you know, everyday kind of restorative conversations in the corridor, all the way through to kind of referrals for restorative conferences, which Make Amends would do. So they're kind of developing that work alongside us. So you've kind of caught us at a really exciting time for everything, which is really great. So yeah, so I hope that's given you a flavour of some of the sort of activities that kind of we're doing in Plymouth under the Together for Childhood banner. And I think for me, it was really important to kind of move a little bit from the theory of what we're doing to actually something very practical, and that can have a very profound impact on people's lives. So I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it engaging. And if you've got any questions, please ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. I've obviously been involved in the project, but every time I hear that rap, it still really touches a chord with me. I think how young people really influenced that campaign in terms of I know one young person wrote a whole verse and felt particularly proud that her verse had been included in its entirety. That's really empowering. I think the process of combining psychoeducation with the opportunity to have a go, kind of products and the campaign, along with the opportunity to edit that, has been a really positive experience for young people. So yeah, to the work that's taken place. Now I can't see any questions in the chat, so I don't know if anybody's got any questions. If you want to raise your virtual hand using the tab at the top of your screen.
And hopefully you can all see the YouTube link now as well. So please, and I mean that genuinely, if you want to kind of use that wrap, you know, with groups of young people that you're working with. And also I kind of think it's important to say at this stage that actually our year 3 ambition is that we hope to reach over 9,000 young people across the city of Plymouth, and hey, maybe beyond, with, you know, by that stage what will be a wrap and a number of other activities to kind of, you know, really kind of spread this message far and wide. So again, the message there is, if there are groups out there, people that are running participation groups and they want to kind of get involved in some way, then please get in touch.
I'm pleased. So the question is, what were the main challenges to engaging young people, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, okay. So my colleagues, Rachel and Simone, I think, who were on the call as well, please chip in if there's anything additional you want to say. They really took the approach of actually the value of relationships with young people. That was their kind of starting point, really. So for some of the groups, I think initially when we started, some of the young people, if we're honest, were kind of wanted to be part of the participation group because it was at the same time as their French lesson and they didn't want to go to French. But we kind of accepted that and we went with it. But I think it was a real testament that kind of that value of that relationship, that young people stuck with us, and they stuck with us despite hiccups and despite lockdowns and despite frustrations along the way. And I think, you know, I know it sounds like a bit of a kind of catch-all response, but it was a real kind of focus on the young person first, and developing that relationship with the young person, and then kind of everything kind of going from there, really. Hopefully that answers your question, Rosanna.
Yeah, I think I just reinforce that message really, Corinne, that what we did is we allowed the time to build those at the pace of young people. So although we had a time constraint in that we were supposed to spend 1 year with this particular school, actually we still let the young people lead the pace of the work. So I think that's really important. And then there is another question, which is fab. Do you have an age limit where people can get involved? I work with young parents who are aged under 24.
So the work so far has been very kind of secondary school based, really, from the kind of descriptors, but certainly in kind of year 3 of the project, when we want to reach as many young people as possible, there are absolutely opportunities there, Claire, for you to kind of get involved with your group. So please, I think you're going to get my email address when the information comes out, so please get in touch. And I think it's also important to recognise that our kind of understanding of what is a young person is kind of shifting from that kind of very rigid 18, and actually we know young people are still sort of developing up into their kind of, you know, mid-20s and maybe even their early 30s, dare I say. So yeah, absolutely lots of opportunities for you guys to get involved in year 3, so please get in touch.
And I think to add to that, what we're trying to do in Together for Childhood is ensure sustainable. So actually what we do have is a series of lesson plans and session plans about how we have delivered the project. Now we have of course we adjust them as we work alongside young people, but there is a framework starting to be developed about how we undertake this work. So I think that's something to share. And then we've just had a question in from Corinne. Not a question, just a thought. I think it would be great for this process to be shared with young people nationally and the outcome lyrics of the song on the Cooth site. So that sounds like a really, really great opportunity.
Fantastic. Corinne, if you can get in touch with me afterwards, that would be marvellous. Thank you.
And then just one other question from Ollie. What additional insights have to this project about young people's experience of peer-to-peer problematic behaviours?
I think one of the things we really picked up on quite early on was this kind of difference between young people's experiences and the way they were kind of thinking about things, and that kind of real difference between those. And so, for example, one of the young people that we spoke with as part of the evaluation was kind of almost describing behaviours that they wouldn't think would be okay for a friend of theirs, but if it was them and their relationships, that was somehow okay and kind of tolerable. So that was for us really, really interesting, kind of really noticing that disparity, if you like, between knowledge and behaviour. So that was a kind of a real insight for us.
Linked us into social norms, which again links us into Marie's presentation this morning around pornography and how that's accepted, that is something that everybody is doing and is normal. And actually what we're trying to do through this co-creation project is help young people speak out about be active bystanders when it's safe for them to do that. Okay, I can't see any more questions and I can't see any hands up. And we had envisaged that this session would just be an hour, even though we'd blocked it in for an hour and a half. So that has brought us right on time. So somebody's just put their hand up. Elaine, please do unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it was just absolutely fascinating. But it's really difficult to understand when young people are not sort of putting themselves at risk or not struggling. And I work in the substance misuse field, so it's really tricky to overlap those links. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so and I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think what we want within Together for Childhood is really developing that understanding that actually very often there is a driver to behaviour. So very often as professionals we see the end result, we see the stuff that's coming out the end. So in your example, kind of young people who are misusing substances, for example, and in my previous role, young people who have displayed harmful sexual behaviour. So you're seeing the end result of something and you're responding to that, when actually what we really want to do is kind of shift the narrative a little bit. So really kind of go upstream and think about, okay, what are the things that may have led to me seeing this behavior kind of, 4, 5, 6 years down the line. And that for me is the kind of the true spirit of kind of doing prevention work, really, is kind of thinking about young people's experiences of trauma and what are the impacts on those. And it can be kind of, I guess there's kind of two examples that I've given are quite extreme. So a young person displaying harmful sexual behaviour, or a young person misusing substances, for example. But it could be, for example, that the young person who is in a school setting and because of their experience of trauma just simply isn't able to kind of engage in the learning because their mind is elsewhere. Their mind is very much in that kind of fight or flight mode. They're trying to survive. So I think for me, it's kind of really kind of going back to all of that, really.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say exactly the same, is that actually they're completely trauma driven, and it's a lot of family-based problems and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
It means that they can't actually access the help they need. It's just like, it's horrible.
Yeah, and we put sticking plasters on things, don't we? Because sometimes that's all that's within our, well, we feel that's all that's within our power. But I think there's a real drive now, and I really feel it, and I'm quite excited to be part of that, to really kind of to go back to the root cause of stuff and try and prevent things before they become problems.
Fantastic.
I don't mean young people are problems, but the problems that. Yeah.
No, I know.
Oh,
The major thing is not just young people as like their hoodies. They're
Yeah.
not. But they're more than that. There's so much more to young people,
Yeah.
and to value young people is such an important thing.
Absolutely. And if I think back, I reflect back often on my youth offending day. So I worked in a youth offending team kind of 10 years ago. And very often we would see young people as that, it would be, there'd be lots of kind of stereotypes. And it was very, very rare that we would actually think about what's going on for that child, what's actually really, really happening. We just see young persons as committed this particular, offence, or they're going into court for this thing. And we never really kind of thought about what was behind that. And I really noticing a shift, which is fab. So
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Corinne. I'm just going to give a moment for any hands to go up or questions to be popped in the chat. If not, we're happy to end the session and let you go away and maybe have another listen to catch via the YouTube link. Okay. We're getting some thanks in now on the chat, which is always really nice and makes us. Thank you for that. And please feel free to leave the call and look out for your evaluation form coming next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
thanks. Bye.